Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And today we're actually getting into another watch content video. Hence why we have the little display going on in front. So in the past we got into a little bit talking about the brands and the tiers and how watches are perceived in terms of the brands versus non-watch people versus watch people in the watch community and whatnot, and even to the upper echelons of people who have a lot of money and how their perspective is on things and whatnot. But in this video, we're kind of tackling on what I had mentioned before in the tiers about how me personally, I always felt that because, and I say me personally because even though I believe this was the case, I feel that some people might disagree, but I always felt that originally the top four luxury brands, the highest luxury brands, but like that general middle ground core luxury brands that everybody would kind of know of and would be familiar with, and each one was kind of in an ascending order, slightly above the other. I always felt was um, going from the bottom coming up was Tag Heuer, Breitling, Omega, and Rolex, and those were always like considered like the to the general public, not to the masses, not to like the people in the watch world, because obviously the people in the watch world, um, the top watches are always the Holy Trinity and other, maybe smaller brands that were very expensive. But to the general public and to the masses, it was always these four brands, in my opinion, were always the what you thought of when you thought of luxury. Cool. Like, and it was a stepping stone. I can go to Tag Heuer is a great starting point of a luxury brand, like your first luxury brand for a lot of people who got into watches. That was their first luxury watch. Then you had, Breitling slightly above it, Omega slightly above that. Though the prices may have been somewhat similar between Breitling and Omega, but Omega kind of had a little bit more cachet to it. I've even heard someone say that who owned a Breitling and Omega, and they were like, I have both, but I feel like Omega's a little bit more prestigious, and then going even further up, Rolex, obviously, which is a special brand because in value order, it's slightly above Omega, but in terms of public knowledge and people knowing about it, it transcends all brands. But nonetheless, keeping within the context of those brands and their price ranges and whatnot, these four brands are always around each other. Um, but now I'm seeing that it feels like, um, you know, that rotation of the top four have kind of changed. I was watching some content recently, and it seems like as of more content that I watch and get into and read on, it almost seems like it's been a shift to where now currently, I could be wrong, but it's just what I'm feeling, is that now the top four when people think of luxury now is Omega, Rolex, Tudor, and Cartier. Which obviously Tudor and Cartier are always brands that were in the mix. But I feel that when people thought of watches and luxury watches, I felt like those other four were the ones. And now, yeah, you still have two of them that are the same, the Omega and Rolex. But I almost feel like now, to people who don't know that much on watches, that people are still going to know Cartier. I mean, they're going to still know, I'm sorry, Tag Heuer, and they're still going to know Breitling. But I feel like they're getting pushed out of that space of being the common four that you think of when you think of just a random person. Hey, you want to buy a luxury watch? I feel like Tudor is almost starting to take that place of on the lower end, and then Cartier is almost taking that place like in the semi middle end. And I mean they are a very obviously known jewelry brand, um, but they're kind of starting to take that place in the watch world where they're holding that kind of weight, I feel, and they're kind of replacing Breitling. And then obviously you have Omega and Rolex. So it was just my thoughts when it came to that. You can comment down below if you think that that's not the case, or what brands do you think is starting to take over that mean core brand. And I don't mean, when I say this, brands that you might just say, well, I like this brand, or you're a watch person and you're speaking from the watch person's perspective. I'm talking about the general public, the people who don't know about watches. So if you are in the watch community, ask maybe one of your family members, ask one of your friends, hey, listen, like if you had to buy a luxury watch, tell me four brands that you think of when you think of a luxury watch, and just see what they say. I'd be very curious to know what some of those responses are that you guys get, and post them down below into the comments, because I'm very interested to know where that change is going for the mass public. Like I said, watch community, they're going to say all types of things and everyone's different. We all know that if you're part of the watch community, we all know that you're going to say to yourself, you know what, like I like this, I like that, I like whatever. But I'm very curious to know from the standpoint of people who do not know anything really about watches other than that, hey, if I was in that position to have money to buy a luxury watch, I would buy one. And this is the brand I would go for that I know of. So I'm very curious to know about that. So definitely post that into the comments below. Um, and before we wrap up this video, yeah, there's plenty of direction for people to go in. So I'm not saying that any of these other brands that are always been known out there are not going to be known anymore. But there's just always been this sense of like the go-to brands for people, especially in that range of being introduced to luxury watches, especially on the standpoint of where before you had certain brands like, say, Tag Heuer would be probably the highest brand that would exist in a basic department store, like Macy's or something like that. And then in addition to that, if a person, if a person, say maybe went to a mall, you would have other brands in the mall. So you get to, they got a little bit of exposure too when you went to malls. But generally nowadays with social media and so much exposure on online and video sites and things like that, YouTube, TikTok, all that, Facebook, all this kind of stuff, it's no longer now what's available in the department store that becomes your initial thought of, well, what are the brands that are there, and going up in that tier list in regards to that, because obviously certain brands would not be in a department store, but they still had a sense of popularity. Now with social media, it's almost changing that shift between what's popular, because for anyone who is familiar in the watch world knows that brands like Tudor, which is a sub brand or sister company of Rolex, um, is a lot more popular than in what it was, say, 10 years ago. People, it was known of, so I'm not trying to say that no one ever knew of it, but what I'm saying is in the eyes of social media now, it's a lot more popular, including, um, you know, uh, brands like Cartier, which was always known, but now it's becoming more of the forefront. I'm really seeing it now become this movement, in terms of just people who don't know any better and they're talking about it. I'm seeing it more and more people's wrists. So I definitely think that it's, the advent of social media and really creating that presence, in many different dynamics too, not just in the dynamic of just exposing the brand and showing you the brand, advertising it to you, but also on the level of celebrities who wear watches. You got certain segments like, talking watches and other video or like watch community, kind of content where it would show like celebrities who are wearing watches, and you start getting this idea like, okay, this is what's popular based on what they're wearing, and maybe they weren't wearing something that was very popular before, but they made it popular. You know what I mean? So that starts changing the dynamic too, along with the fact that you've just got, like I said, this larger presence of social media in terms of just anyone who's doing things not related to watches, and then looking at them and going, what are they wearing? Oh, that's what they're wearing. That's what that person wears. So that's starting to, even like outside of someone doing a watch video, like where they're talking about watches and interviewing someone, you just simply have videos now where there's celebrities or even non-celebrities, just regular content creators, and they're wearing a watch, and you go, oh, look at that person's wearing. Okay, that's their vibe, and you're a follower of them. You start going, I like their style. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's these men's style videos, and they're wearing a watch. Maybe some of these women's style videos where they do makeup or this and that, whatever the case is, and they're wearing a watch. And I've seen those before too. We have women who have like do handbag reviews, and they will have watches, and they'll be like, "Oh, by the way, I'm doing fashion as a whole," and they'll be like, I'm wearing this type of watch." And so that also influences what people know of as the standard, because they're getting their content now straight to them from social media, and they're seeing what people are wearing. So that definitely has all influenced what's considered, quote unquote, the normal watches, in terms of the top, say for kind of middle ground luxury brands, not the highest luxury brands, but what's perceived to be the highest based on the majority of people who just aren't in the know. And I say that also saying that with the weight of that, back in the days, the advertisement always just came from TV or something like that, or news ads, where now we've transcended that. Most advertisement is not coming from TV or some kind of news article or magazines. It's coming straight from social media. So it's definitely changed the way that we perceive things. So, like I said, back to what I mentioned before, just comment down below, and if you have friends or family who will say like what they think is those brands, put your opinion in it as well, and I'd love to see that. And everybody, as always, take care, be safe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.